Hey everyone, I'm Brandon Grasley, and this is Grasley Games. Today I have a deck tech for you. It is a Pauper deck that only uses cards from the Kaladesh block, so I guess it counts as standard Pauper, but it's a little more restricted than that. And it's mono black. It uses a couple of flyers, but mostly we're trying to manipulate counters and possibly use some vehicles to get through for some damage, sort of in the mid-game. We don't want to wait too long on here because this will run out of gas. But there are a few options in the sideboard that I'll show you. So let's start off with some of the cheap creatures. I've got 4 augmenting automatons, and this one is a 1/1 for 1, which is how we're usually trying to use it, but if you do happen to end up in the later game, you can pump it +1/+1 for 1 and a black. But 4 of those, pretty much we're going to be sacrificing those along the way to pump up some other stuff. We have Night Market Lookout, 1/1 for a black. And whenever it becomes tapped, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain a life. This can either be an enabler for Defiant Salvager, which I'll show you in a moment, or it can crew one of our vehicles. Dund Operative is 1 and a black for a 2/2, but it becomes a 3/2 with Death Touch if you have an artifact out, which we generally will. So this is a very efficient creature. This is one that you want to have out there early on. Foundry Screecher is 2 and a black for a flying 2/1, but becomes a 3/1 if you have an artifact, which is, again, usually going to be the case. So this ends up being a 3/1 flyer for 3, which is not too bad. Those are all 4 of us, but this is our first 3 of. We have 3 Lawless Broker. When it dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature that you control. It is a 3/2 for 3, so it's already not bad if you don't have anywhere to sort of spend that counter, if you don't kill this one off. But the basic idea here is that we are going to be killing this on purpose to get a couple of counters. Using this card, Defiant Salvager, you can sacrifice an artifact or a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on this at sorcery speed, not at instant speed, unfortunately, so no shenanigans on your opponent's turn. But the best use of the Lawless Broker is to sacrifice it to Defiant Salvager. You can put both +1/+1 counters right on this guy, or you can put the one from Lawless Broker somewhere else if you would rather. When that sacrificing happens, the Defiant Salvager is a 4 of, we've got 2 Night Market Aeronauts. It's not a great flyer. It costs 3 and a black for only a 2/2. If you have Revolt, it becomes a 3/3 because it gets a counter on it when it comes in. But that's not a fantastic deal. So it's okay. It's just a little bit difficult to get out there, so it's only a 2 of. And this is one that you can sacrifice if you really need to. That's it for our standard creatures. I've got 2 Fortuitous Find, which is a modal card. It lets you grab an artifact or a creature card from your graveyard back up to your hand, not onto the battlefield. But that costs 2 and a black, so 2 of those. 2 Subtle Strike. Subtle Strike is 1 and a black. Another modal card. You can choose one or both of these. Target creature gets -1/-1, and or you can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. So I was finding in my testing a lot of the time I was just casting this because I had it with no great creature to spend it on. But if there is an X1 creature that you want to burn, or it is an instant though, so you can use it in combat if you can take out most of a creature's toughness. 2 of those. Daring Demolition, I've got 3 here. It lets you destroy a target creature or vehicle for 2 black. A little bit on the expensive side, but it does target a vehicle even when it is not a creature. So that's not too bad. And there's another one in the sideboard if you're up against a vehicles deck specifically. Speaking of vehicles, we have 4 copies of Sky Skiff, the 2/3 with a crew cost of 1, and it is a flyer. It's a 2-cost artifact, so we can get it out there. If we had to sacrifice it to Defiant Salvager, we could, but most of the time we're just going to crew this with any of our cheap creatures up there that we still have hanging around. The Night Market Lookout, the Augmenting Automaton. We use that. Night Market Lookout in particular would be great. Implement of Malice is a 2-cost artifact. You pay 2 and sacrifice it to cause the other player to discard a card, and when it goes into the graveyard you draw a card. So this is a nice thing to use with Defiant Salvager as well. So you can sacrifice this for its own effect, or you can sacrifice it for the counter on Defiant Salvager for free. We have 22 swamps. And for what it's worth, that one's my favorite swamp right there. I like that one. Over on the side where we mostly have a few extra copies of the removal spells, but I have 2 Renegade Freighter. This is a 3-cost artifact with a crew cost of 2, and when it attacks it gets +1/+1 and trampled till the end of turn. So if you can get this down and start to crew it with, well, there's quite a few creatures here that'll have power 2, it can get through for some significant damage. It'll be doing 5 damage with trample. Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot. If that Night Market Aeronaut, for example, is not performing, I've swapped it out for this here. A couple extra 2-cost artifacts, and it has a kind of a relevant effect. You can sacrifice it to draw a card and lose a life, and you do draw a card when it comes in as well. So there is some card draw here. It's not fantastic, but you've got a cantrip and kind of an expensive card draw. And Dakara Scavenger, there's 5 and a black. When it enters the battlefield, you can take a artifact or creature from your graveyard and put it onto the top of your library. And it's a 4/6, so this is one that if you're finding you are getting to the late game, you might want this in your deck instead of probably instead of that Subtle Strike, or maybe even the Lawless Broker you want to take out in place of this if you're finding yourself moving into the late game. Okay, so that's what I've got for you. It's not a super fast deck, but it's not super slow either, and I hope that you enjoy trying it out. If you have suggestions for other black or colorless cards that I can swap in from the Kaladesh or Aether Revolt sets, I'd appreciate some feedback, and let me know what you think down in the comments below. Also, while you're down there, please like and subscribe to the channel, and you can also get a hold of me on Facebook, on Twitter, Patreon, and there's also a blog there, so I would love to talk to you. Thanks very much, GG, and I'll see you later.